You didn't know? Oh, darling, that was the most satisfying part of all. Watching them realize that the trailer trash old lady was the one writing their paychecks. I was in room 402 at St. Michael's Regional, a nice, sterile blue room coming out of a bypass procedure that had taken me as close to the finish line as I'd ever been. They called it a successful recovery. But let me tell you, when you're 73, any surgery that involves cracking your ribs is a near-death experience. My son, Daniel, bless his anxious heart, was pacing like a caged panther. He's a good boy, a man of 35 with his late father's gentle eyes, but he's always been soft where he needed to be steel. Then there was Chelsea Hayes Maxwell. My daughter-in-law of 4 years sat in the corner, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of her phone screen. She wasn't praying or even scrolling for news. She was live streaming. "Day 5 of freedom from the farm," she whispered, her voice an oily, conspiratorial purr for the tiny microphone clipped to her Italian silk blouse. "The old man, sorry, my father-in-law Thomas, is finally in recovery, but the old lady is still unconscious. So, we can finally talk about the upgrade." My eyes were closed, my breathing regulated by the gentle hiss of a machine beside the bed. She thought I was nothing more than a lump of failing tissue and bone, deaf and dumb to the world, a perfect prop for her next viral video. She moved the phone slightly, giving her followers a peek at my husband, Thomas, in his own room down the hall, before panning back to herself, leaning in for the dramatic finish. What they don't know about the Maxwell homestead, y'all, is that it's nothing but a dusty, generational anchor. The second we get that power of attorney finalized, we are listing this poverty museum and moving somewhere that appreciates vision. I felt a low, steady thrumming beneath my breastbone, and it wasn't my newly mended heart. It was something colder, something far more deliberate. She had no idea what she had just set in motion. What she thought was a harmless, worthless scrap of land was about to become the epicenter of her very public, very painful downfall. Before I tell you how a sweet old woman like me managed to orchestrate the swift and total collapse of her daughter-in-law's perfect little world, you need to understand the history of that poverty museum. The Maxwell homestead sits on 300 acres outside Juniper Creek, Indiana. It's been in the family since 1912. The house, built in 1948, is solid, drafty, and smells like lavender and old leather. We've got a rickety, crimson-colored grain silo that can be seen from the state highway, and a porch swing that's worn smooth by 4 generations of rear ends. To me, it's home. To Chelsea, it was a backdrop. She came from what she called the right kind of money. Her parents, Roger and Linda Hayes, had been minor players in the Chicago restaurant scene until they weren't. A series of bad investments and a particularly nasty health department audit wiped them out 10 years ago. But Chelsea never let go of the pretense. She carried a handbag that cost more than my 1999 Ford Ranger pickup truck was worth. She dressed in clothes with unpronounceable French names. I, meanwhile, wore denim and flannel, drank instant coffee, and found my greatest pleasure in a successful spring planting. The social media campaign began innocently enough. Videos with titles like "City Girl Visits the Country." Then the tone shifted, turning mean. "My father-in-law still uses a pencil and paper for accounting," she'd giggle into her camera, panning over the exact same ledger book my Thomas had used for 50 years and his father before him. It's literally the Stone Age, you guys. We're dealing with an authentic monument to refusing progress. The comments, of course, were venomous. "Girl, you're slumming it for real." "That's not rustic. That's a hoarding situation. 6 months ago, she ramped it up." The theme became escaping generational poverty. She filmed our simple, well-worn kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made every Thanksgiving dinner since 1970, and used it as proof of our failure. "Some families just accept being left behind," she posted. Filming the 1970s avocado green wall oven, her follower count exploded from 15,000 to over 80,000 in a month. Brand partnerships, skincare, fitness, fast fashion started flooding in. "This is my content goldmine, Dan," I overheard her tell my son one night. "Small-town struggles are trending, and your parents are providing the perfect, pathetic template." Daniel, bless his heart, tried to defend us. Mom and Dad built a life here, Chels. This place means everything to them. Built what? She'd scoff. A shack in a mountain of debt? They are dragging us down, Daniel. Your father's mindset is stuck in 1950, and soon will be too. She had turned our modest, honest life into a public spectacle. The hand-stitched quilts I made became primitive decor. Thomas's purple heart displayed on the mantel, a piece of deeply personal history, became bargain basement memorabilia. The breaking point wasn't the surgery itself. It was the phone call that came 3 days after. I was still in my recovery room, supposedly asleep, when my phone rang. Chelsea had left hers nearby. Her voice, crystal clear and utterly devoid of compassion, was on speaker, pitched low, as if she were talking about a stolen relic. "Hi, this is Chelsea Maxwell calling about the property listing we discussed." Yes, the 300-acre homestead on Juniper Creek Road, property listing. My blood pressure monitor immediately climbed. "My father-in-law is incapacitated," she continued, crueler than I'd ever heard her. "And the mother-in-law is, well, she's old. We need to move quickly before they can interfere. We've got the power of attorney finalized." I did 2 things without opening my eyes. I hit the record button on my cell, and I listened. "Every single damning word!" The appraiser said $950,000 for the whole package. Land, house, all the rusty junk they call equipment. Yes, I know it sounds low, but honestly, this place represents everything backward about Indiana. Old farmers hoarding land while young families struggle. She paused, likely listening to the developer on the other end. Thomas Maxwell is 78, and Evie, the mother, is 73. No business sense whatsoever. They've been farming the same plots the same way for 60 years. They don't even use modern irrigation. The man still handwrites his books in ledgers. Can you believe that? I could hear her elegant, expensive heels clicking on the tile floor of the hallway. Listen, between you and me, I'm doing society a favor getting this developed. The town needs progress, not some stubborn old woman's dirt farming museum. My husband, Daniel, is too sentimental to see it, but Evie is holding back the entire family's future. She'll be in recovery for weeks, maybe months. And honestly, at her age, with her health problems, she might not be making decisions much longer anyway. A cold, sharp wave of determination washed over me, stronger than any pain medication. "I just need to convince Daniel that selling is the compassionate choice," she went on. "I've shown him the numbers. We're bleeding money every month keeping this place running. Property taxes, equipment maintenance, seed costs. It's a black hole. And for what? So Evie can pretend she's still relevant. You want to know the truth? Evie Maxwell is everything wrong with rural America. Stubborn, backwards, and too proud to admit the world passed her by." The call ended. Chelsea strolled back into the room, adjusted my blanket with a fake, saccharine smile for the camera she thought was off, and started scrolling through her Instagram. The old woman who couldn't hear, who wouldn't be making decisions much longer, had just documented her own daughter-in-law declaring war on the only thing she truly loved. I had exactly 72 hours before I was discharged to decide how to respond. The realtor, the developer's agent, Mr. Thorne, was scheduled for a property walkthrough 5 days later. Daniel was wavering, caught between his wife's ambition and his loyalty to the land. I could have sat up right then, called my lawyer, and shut down the sale with a single word. But that would have been too easy, too quick. Chelsea thought she was dealing with a confused, flat-broke old woman who kept her money in a teapot. She had no idea that 3 decades of quiet, disciplined investment had built an empire. I knew I had to let her dig the hole deeper. Let her reveal her character to the world, and when she felt most confident, most untouchable, I would show her what real power and real consequences looked like. I'm an old woman, and I don't have time for nonsense. But before I tell you what that child didn't know, before the real fireworks start, I need you to promise me something. You stay right here. Let this old heart know where its story is traveling by giving this a like, and tell me in the comments if you've ever had to teach someone a lesson about respect. Now pay attention, because this is where the money is. The Juniper Creek community knew Thomas Maxwell as the man who farmed his 300 acres with antique tractors and a kind, weathered smile. They knew me as the woman who sold the best organic preserves at the farmer's market. What they didn't know was what Thomas and I had been doing since 1995. In 1995, Thomas and I formed Juniper Organics and Agri Holdings LLC. We stopped focusing on corn and soy, the high-volume, low-margin crops the rest of the county did, and shifted entirely to specialty organic produce, heirloom tomatoes, small-batch herbs, and specialty greens. We bypassed the local co-op and by 2005 had secured direct, lucrative contracts with major grocery chains across the Midwest. That worthless dirt farm wasn't worthless. It generated an average of $310,000 in monthly revenue for the past decade. But agriculture was just the engine. I was the financial architect. In the late 1980s, I started buying up foreclosed properties in the next county. A cheap townhouse here, a dilapidated fourplex there. I fixed them, rented them, and rolled the income into the next purchase. Today, our real estate arm, Creekstone Investments, owns 27 rental properties valued at $16.8 million. The monthly rent income alone is over $75,000. Chelsea was plotting to sell a $950,000 property. She was actually trying to liquidate an agricultural and real estate empire conservatively valued at $58 million. But the part that gave me the most wicked, quiet satisfaction involved her family. 3 years ago, when Roger and Linda Hayes, her parents, were completely destitute after their restaurant scandal, who do you think gave them a lifeline? Roger Hayes, hired as a ground superintendent at Cypress Ridge Golf and Events, $65,000 annual salary. Linda Hayes, hired as the catering supervisor at the same club, $52,000 annual salary. They never knew their employer. All hiring went through a faceless management firm. I bought the Cypress Ridge Golf and Events in 2020 when the previous owner went bankrupt. It was a beautiful piece of land, a great investment, and, as it turned out, a perfect place to employ the parents of my future daughter-in-law. Roger and Linda Hayes had been surviving on my money for 3 years, while their daughter filmed TikToks mocking my poverty. And there was more. Chelsea's sister, Bethany, was teaching at a prestigious private academy. I own 51% of that school's board. Her poor, sweet old grandmother, Eleanor Hayes, her assisted living facility, the Willowbrook Senior Residence, was funded through the Maxwell Family Charitable Foundation and had been for 5 years. Even the high-end apartment complex where Chelsea and Daniel were living in Indianapolis was recently acquired by Creekstone Investments. Chelsea's entire upwardly mobile life, her status and her family's stability, rested on the quiet, massive wealth of the hillbilly cosplay family she was trying to escape. I called my lawyer, Michael, from the hospital. "Michael, I need you to document everything," I instructed him. "Every post, every conversation. I want a complete, legal record of defamation and planned unlawful interference. Mrs. Maxwell, are you planning to contest the sale?" he asked, already anticipating the lawsuit. "No, Michael," I replied, staring at the ceiling. "I'm planning to teach a lesson about respect. I need to know exactly how much the Maxwell family is worth, documented for a public presentation. September 22nd, discharge day." I played my part perfectly. The frail, confused old widow being wheeled out to her son's car. Daniel fussed over me, trying to tuck the blanket just right. Chelsea, of course, was too busy recording her emotional goodbye to the hospital trauma for her followers to even look up. "Take it easy today. Evie," she instructed, not unkindly, but certainly without care. "Mr. Thorne is coming by around 2 p.m. to look at the house, but you don't need to be involved. Just rest." "I'll be fine, dear," I rasped, leaning heavily on Daniel's arm. "Just need to make a few phone calls, check on some old friends." She rolled her eyes slightly, emotion visible only to Daniel and me. "Just don't embarrass us in front of the developer, okay? This is important." "I understand completely," I assured her. And I did. I understood everything. The first call went to the manager of Cypress Ridge Golf and Events. "This is Evelyn Maxwell," I began. "I've been reviewing employee metrics, specifically Roger and Linda Hayes. I want their annual reviews conducted at next Tuesday's full staff meeting, publicly. And I want to ensure every employee understands that discretion and loyalty are core values. Those who respect the institution thrive. Those who don't, well, we have policies for that." The second call went to the administrator of the Willowbrook Senior Residence. We are initiating an immediate, rigorous re-annual assessment of all Foundation beneficiaries, particularly Eleanor Hayes. I want documentation regarding her continued need for charitable support ready by tomorrow. The third call was to my business attorney. I need lease termination documentation for the tenants in Willowbrook Apartments, Unit 23C, the one in Indianapolis. Recent tenant behavior may constitute grounds for violating community standards. Unit 23C was Chelsea and Daniel's apartment. By noon, the quiet machinery of my fortune was in motion. That afternoon, while Chelsea and Mr. Thorne were touring the homestead, laughing at the antique plumbing and the decrepit barn, her parents received their first unsettling notices. Roger and Linda were both told their previously private performance reviews would now be public, part of a new transparency initiative. Linda also received a new employee handbook detailing strict social media conduct and confidentiality clauses. At the Willowbrook senior residence, Administrator Susan called Roger Hayes, sounding concerned. "Mr. Hayes, the Maxwell Foundation is conducting an unscheduled review of Eleanor's care funding. They are evaluating whether your family has other means of support. If they determine you no longer qualify, the funding could be redirected. A $3,800 monthly bill was the difference between comfort and a county ward." The Hayes family had no margin for error. Their small, comfortable life, the one their daughter mocked as being below their station, was about to evaporate. Neither Roger nor Linda connected their professional distress to their daughter's harmless farm-shaming videos. They had no idea their daughter's actions were about to bankrupt them all. The next morning, Daniel found me in the old barn office, the sun slanting through the dusty windows onto my late husband's wooden desk. I was surrounded by stacks of paper, bank statements, property deeds, and employment contracts. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice strained. "Of course, son." "Pull up a stool," I said, putting down my pen. "It's Chelsea. She's getting hammered online. People are saying the numbers don't add up. How can she afford that car if we're supposedly drowning in debt? Someone even suggested she's fabricating the whole poverty narrative." "Smart people, those online folk," I murmured. "What did she tell them?" "She said you and Dad are too proud to admit we need help. That you hide your financial problems to protect your ego." I opened the top drawer and pulled out 2 crisp bank statements. "Daniel, what if I told you that our old equipment and broken fencing are choices, not necessities?" He looked confused. I handed him the first statement. Juniper Organics and Agri Holdings, LLC. Balance, $914,750. His eyes widened. "Mom, what is this?" "Our monthly operating account. After all salaries and expenses. Now look at this one." I handed him the Creekstone investment statement. Balance, $645,880. Rental income from 27 properties. His hands started to tremble. "I don't understand. If we have this money, why do we live like this? Because living simply isn't the same as being poor, Daniel. Your father's family grew up during the Depression. We learned that flashy wealth makes you a target. Quiet wealth keeps you safe and allows you to do good work." I handed him the last document, a property deed. "Now where do Chelsea's parents work?" "Cypress Ridge Golf and Events." "Read the owner's name on that deed, son." He read it twice, his mouth falling open. "Evelyn and Thomas Maxwell, through Creekstone Investments." "Bought it in 2020, I confirmed. "So Roger and Linda, they work for you." "They have for 3 years. All hiring went through management, so they never knew." Daniel stood up and slowly began to pace the small office, running his hand through his hair. "This is insane. Chelsea has been making videos about how broke we are, telling her followers she's saving us from financial ruin. And all this time, her family has been living entirely on our money. Does she know?" "Not yet," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "But she's about to learn. The annual Cypress Ridge Charity Gala is next week." "It's the event of the year." Daniel's eyes widened. "I know. You and Dad have always been the largest donors." "Platinum-level sponsor for 8 years running," I confirmed, pulling out the gala program. "We're planning to teach your wife a very public lesson about respect, Daniel. The question is, are you with me?" He looked at the bank statements, at the deed to the entire golf club, and then at me, the little old lady in the denim jacket. "I'm with you, Mom, all the way. October 12th. Cypress Ridge Golf and Events Annual Charity Gala. 300 of the county's most prominent citizens were in attendance. Black tie, $1,000 per plate, with a silent auction benefiting the local education foundation. Chelsea had been documenting her preparations for weeks. The custom-made Monique L'Huillier gown, the hair, the makeup, the Hermès Kelly bag she called her investment piece. Tonight, I finally get to network with people who understand vision. She'd captioned her final story. No more pretending to fit in with small-town values. This is where I belong. I watched her stories from my own table near the back of the ballroom. I was wearing a simple, tailored black evening dress I'd owned for a decade, Thomas's diamond solitaire necklace, and minimal makeup. No flash, just quiet authority. Chelsea and Daniel arrived at 7:30. She was a glittering spectacle, immediately starting to work the room, as she called it. I watched her approach Mrs. Helena Davies, the CEO of the regional bank. "Hi, I'm Chelsea Maxwell," I heard her introduce herself. "My family is new to the charitable circuit, but we're looking to get involved now that we're moving away from the rural life." Mrs. Davies smiled politely. "Maxwell, of course. Your family has been the cornerstone of this event for years. We couldn't run this without the Anderson, the Maxwell Family Foundation." Chelsea looked utterly lost. "Oh, that must be a different Maxwell family," she stammered. "We're just starting out with our charitable giving." I almost laughed out loud. Mrs. Davies was talking about my 6-figure donations, not realizing Chelsea was my daughter-in-law. At 8:30, the formal program began. The club president, Robert Thorne, no relation to the developer she was using, took the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've raised a staggering $550,000 tonight. Before we proceed to the auction, I want to acknowledge our most generous supporter. This year's platinum sponsor, with a donation of $150,000, is, as always, the Maxwell Family Foundation." Applause filled the room. Chelsea, seated with Daniel, clapped hesitantly, her eyes scanning the donor list displayed on the screens. "And, as is our tradition," Thorne continued, "Mr. Thomas Maxwell would normally address the gathering. But since Thomas is still recovering, we are honored to have the driving force behind the foundation, and indeed behind Juniper Organics, Mrs. Evelyn Maxwell, address the gathering." The room went quiet. I stood up slowly and walked the long distance to the podium, carrying a slim black briefcase. I could feel the silent shock waves radiating from Chelsea's table. Her champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering against the white linen tablecloth. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice perfectly steady, amplified by the ballroom's acoustics. "For those who don't know me, I'm Evie Maxwell. I own a small farm outside town, 300 acres of herbs and specialty greens. A very simple operation." I reached the podium, placed the briefcase down, and looked directly at the table where Chelsea sat, now frozen with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. "Some of you," I began, "may have recently seen social media content about our family, about rural poverty, generational limitations, and the struggles of farming families. My daughter-in-law, Chelsea, has been quite vocal about these issues." I opened my briefcase and pulled out the first document, the deed for the golf club. "I want to take this opportunity to correct some misconceptions. This is the property deed for the Cypress Ridge Golf and Events. Purchase price $5.1 million. Purchased in 2020 by Creekstone Investments, a subsidiary of the Maxwell Family Holdings." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Roger and Linda Hayes, seated at an employee table, went ghostly pale. I mention this because several of our valued Cypress Ridge employees may not realize who ultimately signs their paychecks. I held up 2 employee contracts. Roger Hayes, ground superintendent. Linda Hayes, catering supervisor. Both solid employees for 3 years. Combined salaries of $117,000 annually. Every dollar from a Maxwell-owned company. Linda's hands flew to her mouth. The club members were watching them. I also want to address the Maxwell Family Foundation's charitable work. We quietly support families in need. I pulled out the foundation ledger. Eleanor Hayes, assisted living care. Monthly support of $3,800 for 60 months. Total foundation contribution, $228,000. Chelsea was slumped in her chair, trying to become invisible behind the centerpiece. Now, you might wonder why I'm sharing this information publicly. After all, charity should be private, shouldn't it? I pulled my phone out of my handbag and connected it to the large screen behind the podium. Unfortunately, some recipients of our family's generosity have chosen to publicly mock that generosity. The first screenshot flashed onto the screen. Chelsea's TikTok video, calling our homestead a poverty museum. Gasps echoed through the room. More screenshots appeared in rapid succession. My father-in-law represents generational poverty. Old farmers hoarding land. Hillbilly cosplay. These, I stated clearly, are direct quotes from social media content created by someone whose family has been living entirely on Maxwell charity for the past 3 to 5 years. The room was silent. I brought up the financial documentation. Juniper Organics and Agri Holdings, valued at $58 million. Monthly revenue, $310,000. Real estate assets, $16.8 million. The numbers hung in the air like a final, devastating accusation. The poor, broke old woman being mocked for her primitive farm, I said, my voice dropping to a powerful whisper, actually owns the entire structure where this evening's event is being held. I closed my briefcase and looked at Chelsea's table. Effective immediately, the Maxwell Family Foundation is reassessing all charitable commitments. Recipients who demonstrate public ingratitude or disrespect will have their funding immediately redirected to more deserving causes. I pulled out the final stack of paper. Employment termination notices for Roger and Linda Hayes, effective Monday morning. Eleanor Hayes' assisted living funding ends October 31st. And the apartment lease for Unit 23C at Willowbrook Complex is voided for violation of community standards. Linda started to weep quietly. Roger looked like a man who'd just been hit by a train. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I concluded, looking around the stunned ballroom, this is what happens when performed wealth, social media ego, tries to compete with authentic, quiet power. Chelsea wanted to show her followers what escaping poverty looked like. Now they can watch her learn what real poverty feels like. Security was immediately at my elbow. Chelsea stumbled to her feet, her expensive dress now looking like a cheap costume. Evie, please. I didn't know. I'll delete everything. I'll apologize. You didn't know because you never stopped judging long enough to ask, I stated, picking up my wine glass. 3 years ago, I quietly hired your parents. I paid your grandmother's bills. I never asked for thanks, but I certainly don't subsidize people who call me trailer trash on social media. She turned to Daniel. Please, Dan, talk to her. Daniel looked at his wife, his face a mask of pity and disgust. You did this, Chels, all of it. She gave your family everything, and you mocked her for sport. The problem isn't that you didn't know. The problem is you never tried to know. They left through the main doors, her heels echoing a final, desperate rhythm on the marble floor. 3 days later, the consequences were finalized. Roger and Linda Hayes were unemployed and receiving calls from the Willowbrook administrator. Eleanor Hayes was moved to a subsidized county facility. Chelsea and Daniel had 72 hours to vacate their high-end apartment, which I now owned. The social media fallout was catastrophic. Chelsea deleted all her profiles after her escaping poverty video was flooded with comments. Imagine calling your 58-miler mother-in-law trailer trash. The Poverty Museum owns the golf club you're showing off in. Daniel came to the homestead alone that Friday evening. He found me in the barn office, the same old ledger books open on the desk. Mom, he said quietly, I owe you an apology for letting her disrespect you and our family for so long. You chose correctly when it mattered, son, I said, setting my pen down. What happens now is you decide if you're married to a woman who loves you or a woman who loves your potential status. She wants to try counseling, says she can change. People can change, Daniel, I told him. But they have to want to change for the right reasons, not just because they got caught. What about her parents, Mom? He asked, his voice heavy with guilt. They're good people. They didn't deserve this. You're right. They didn't deserve what their daughter did to them. Or what she did to us. I opened the desk drawer and handed him a plain business card. Tell Roger to call me next week. I might know someone who needs a good ground superintendent, someone who appreciates loyalty and discretion. Daniel smiled for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Mom." "Just remember this lesson, son," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder. "Authentic wealth serves others. Fake wealth serves only ego." After he left, I sat in the quiet of the old barn. The ledger books chronicled decades of real success. The simple tools around me were the foundation of a $58 million empire. Chelsea was right about one thing. Generational wealth is real, but it's not about money. It's about character. And character, unlike a follower count, can't be bought.